This afternoon, Jacqueline Alvarez, the Chief of the United Nations Chemicals and Health Branch, will provide welcoming remarks. We will then hear from the head of the Science Policy Panel Secretariat and the host country updates on preparations for the meeting in Bangkok. The resolution adopted at the United Nations Environment Assembly that started this process requested the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme to invite the World Health Organization to play a role as appropriate in this process. And the World Health Organization is also here with us to provide their views on this process. We have also invited various stakeholders to speak on how they are mobilizing themselves on this process. You will hear from civil society, private sector, and the scientific community, their views and how they are preparing for the Bangkok meeting. Before we give the floor to Jacqueline Alvarez, let me remind you that the documents presented, the summary, as well as the video of the event will be made available on the webpage of this event. The link is being shared in the chat for who is online and is also available on the screen. Throughout the event, those who are online can raise their questions by using the Q&A box. We will use your questions to feed the discussion after the presentation if time allows. With that, Jacqueline, over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good day to all of you. It's a pleasure to be with you in this briefing on the Science Policy Panel for Chemicals, Waste and Prevention of Pollution. As you have heard from Diana, this is an extremely important element in the three dimensions and pillars that the environment ministers, but also the international stakeholders need to address. As you might have heard several times, we are trying to phase out three planetary crises involving climate, biodiversity, as well as chemicals and pollutions. And for two of those pillars, we already have the scientific basis and the bodies that are contributing fully to the development of the science that it is needed. All of those assessments and all of those issues and areas that are critical for the governments and the rest of the stakeholders to take on board and make a difference, and in reality to finalize those problems. In the area of chemicals, waste and pollution, we didn't have that until UNEA last year, 1 year ago, decided to establish a process to create this new science policy panel on chemicals, waste and prevention of pollution. I think I don't need to really highlight why this is so important, but it is a great opportunity to embrace that and to really create something that can make a difference. So far, putting things forward from the scientific community has been essential, but it is also very critical to see how that interface that can be uptaken by the different possible agents of change that we have in our world. For Geneva, it's extremely relevant as well, as Geneva has a very strong scientific basis, not only at the level of universities, but at the level of research and at the level of the different activities that are taking place. And this moment with this webinar, but also I will like to encourage all of you to follow the process very closely as we are shaping a new panel, a panel that can really have a lot of teeth if we are smart enough to create it in that way. So with this, I thank you very much for the opportunity to start and do these opening remarks. And back to you, Diana.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. And now for an update on the preparations, and I keep, saying the name of this meeting per extenso, for the resumed first session of the ad hoc open-ended working group on a science policy panel to contribute further to the sound management of chemicals and waste and to prevent pollution. It's our pleasure to give the floor to Kevin Helps, who is the head of the Secretariat leading on this process and who is joining us from Nairobi. Kevin, over to you.
Thank you, Diana, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody online and in the office in Geneva. I'm unable to join you. As mentioned, I'm based in Nairobi at UNEP headquarters, but it is wonderful to have this opportunity, and thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to give you a short update on where we stand currently in the preparations for this very important meeting to be held in Bangkok at the end of this month. There are some slides which have been presented, which I'll present. They will be made available. I'll probably whisk through a few of them in the interest of time. But if there are any questions on any of the content in the slides, please do feel free to contact me, and I will do my best to address any questions or concerns which you may have. Next slide, please. So as was mentioned, the resolution that came out of the resumed fifth session of UNEA, Resolution 8, sets the ball in motion, so to speak. But there's been a lot of work over many years leading up to this time. And I think it's important that we recognize that there has been a lot of background work in the world of chemicals, in the world of waste. And now, with the addition of the pollution element, I think we have a very strong and potentially important driver, which will help us address this planetary crisis, as Jacqueline outlined. This will be the third of the triplets, along with IPCC and IPBES. And so, again, one of the things which we are hoping to achieve during this process is to allow us to perhaps integrate our work more closely across those three bodies to come up with integrated solutions and integrated assessments as far as possible. But that's in the future. At the moment, we're in the open-ended working group process, and as is made clear in this slide, we have been set a very, very short deadline to achieve this process by the end of 2024, only 2 years from today. There's a lot of work to be done. We are aiming to have 3 meetings, as I will outline to you. And so it'll be very important that we have the support from stakeholders from across all disciplines to help us formulate the proposal, which will go to an intergovernmental meeting, hopefully before the end of 2024. Next slide, please. So this is the very, very skeletal outline of our timing. As you see, we have the 30th of January meeting, 30th of January to 3rd of February meeting highlighted here in blue. And following that, there will be a very, very important intersessional period. And we are hoping at this first, this OEWG 1.2, that the member states will give us clear direction on where you want us to focus moving forward. If we are to achieve this very tight deadline, we will aim to have a second OEWG meeting before the end of this year. We are currently examining options for the location of that second meeting. As a default, if no member state comes forward with an offer to host that meeting in Q4, we will be looking at the option of hosting it here in Nairobi at UNON. So that is the default fallback position. If it is in October, November next year, it means that we have a period up until around the end of August to formulate the main meeting documents which were required for that second meeting. So 8 months or 7 months of very hard, intense work with regional consultations, with information sharing through webinars, through questionnaires, surveys, a number of bureau meetings, all of which need to be crammed into an 8-month period, and also allow us time and resources to focus on the development of very important meeting documents. We'll then scan forward into 2024, where in order to give us sufficient time to, again, finalize documents, look at issues related to governance, rules of procedure, operating principles of the new panel, and come up with solid proposals, building on the work on functions and scope, which we will be looking at OEWG 1.2 and OEWG 2, We would aim to have this in Q3 or possibly Q4 in 2024. Again, that gives us sufficient lead time during the intersessional period to actually develop the substantive documents which will be needed and discussed at that third meeting. We then aim to have an intergovernmental meeting before the end of 2024. It's a very congested calendar already, 2024. And so we do also need to look at the potential option for that intergovernmental meeting to slip into Q1 or Q2 of 2025. So we will complete the task of developing the proposals, I believe, within the time frame allocated, but we do need to be realistic in terms of what can be achieved given the very intense meeting schedule in 2023 and already notified in 2024. People will have a lot of other work to focus on with BRS, with Minamata, with the SciChem, ICCM5 undoubtedly coming in. And this really does compress the time even more than would ordinarily be available. Next slide, please. So what have we done so far? Many of you will know that we've already, in order to achieve the remit of starting the OEWG process within 2022, we did hold a one-day procedural meeting here in Nairobi on the 6th of October. And we did manage to deal with a number of important issues, such as election of a number of the Bureau members, and 7 of the 10 of those Bureau members are now in place. We do need to get agreement at the next meeting on the appointment of a chair, and procedures are now being put in place to ensure that the process by which that will be achieved is clearly defined and also presented to member states ahead of the start of that meeting. We did endorse the adoption of the UNEA rules, mutatis mutandis, and we did provide for an initial exchange of views on and country statements and member state and stakeholder statements at that first meeting. So we are not envisaging reopening statements at the start of this new meeting in Bangkok, but encouraging anyone who does have any further statements to make to do this in writing to the Secretariat ahead of that meeting. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we do have 7 of our 10 Bureau members identified, and here they are. You'll notice the star next to the representative from Iraq. We are currently in the process that representative has resigned from their position and is being replaced by a representative from China. And this is a silent process which hopefully will be completed by the end of this month. So we are hoping that the representative from China will be able to take their Bureau member place and be actively engaged at OEWG 1.2 at the meeting at the end of January into February. You will notice that we're currently short of 1 member from the Western Europe and other group, and also 2 members for the Eastern European group. We, as I said, are putting in place a process and guidance on how to address these gaps during the OEWG 1.2, and that the second member from the Western Europe and other groups region will also be endorsed as the chair of the Bureau moving forward. This is the only candidate that has been put forward but through the regional structures to date, and so we are not envisaging an alternate proposal being put forward for the chair. But we do have to follow due process in accordance with our rules of procedure for UNEA, and that is now being finalized. Next slide, please. So some practical information. As I mentioned, the meeting will commence on January the 30th and run for 5 days. And we have allowed for a regional and other groups preparatory meetings to be held on the day before the event on January the 29th at the ESCAP United Nations Conference Center in Bangkok. The registration is scheduled to close on 15th of January and may be done through the following link. We are exploring the option of extending that period for registration, and we will communicate that if we decide to proceed on that basis to member states and major groups in the coming days. If you do have any questions or need information, please do visit our webpage, and the presentation that will be shared will have a link to that webpage. We should note that our meeting documents were provided, translated meeting documents were provided by the 23rd of December and are available on the website. And a series of information documents are also available in support of those meeting documents, and we'll quickly run through those documents now in the next slides. Next slide, please. So the agenda for this session, the first 4 items on here are very procedural, and they will cover the election of officers, adoption of agenda, and organizational matters, obviously. General statements will be very, very limited to member states that perhaps didn't have the opportunity to make them in the October meeting, but we would not encourage extensive reopening of general statements at this time. We then move to the meat of the meeting, which looks at the timetable and organization of work. Specifically here under item 5, we want to get to a position whereby we have clear guidance on the intersessional period leading to OEWG 2 in Q4 of this year. So we'll be focusing heavily on that aspect of the discussion. And item 6 is really, I suppose, where we have the really substantive issues where we will be looking at scope and functions of the new panel. We were asked at the October meeting to limit our focus at this meeting in January to the issues of scope and functions. This is in accordance with the text which is in the resolution, and we have expanded that in a number of documents which are available on the website, which I hope many of you have already seen. We have provided a number of preparatory documents as INF documents, which also introduce the idea of the organizational setting of the new panel, and also the operations of similar panels and the potential rules of procedure which we may need to consider in future meetings. So there is a foundation laid there in the INF documents to also help the meeting guide us in terms of what we look at next in future meetings. We then basically move to other matters and adoption of the in-session report before we close the meeting, hopefully successfully on the Friday, February the 3rd. Next slide, please. So these are the main meeting documents. As I mentioned, there are the procedural documents and also then the scope document, the principal functions, and then a document which details with budget and provisional work plan. Next slide, please. The INF documents go over a little bit of old ground in terms of the resolution, the rules of procedure of UNEA, our scenario note, which we are currently updating based on our bureau meeting yesterday with a little bit more information. So we will notify you when the updated version is posted. We've also done a mapping analysis, which has shown that the landscape in which this new panel will function is a very, very complicated one. There are multiple layers and multiple interactions which this new body will need to define, and defining those relationships with partners such as BRS, Minamata, SciChem, Ozone Secretariat, Montreal Protocol, etc., will be very, very important, along with defining the role and the interrelationship with other bodies, other agencies such as WHO and other IOMC bodies, but also the private sector, academia, very importantly, and also civil society. So the touch points and the interrelationships of this new panel with all of those stakeholders and all of those disciplines, because this has to be an interdisciplinary body, it has to be multi-stakeholder. This is what we've been asked to do. Does make this whole mapping exercise very, very complicated. We've also looked at the comparative analysis of existing assessment structures, not just IPCC and IPBES, but also IRP, Ozone, WHO. So we are looking to take the best of what is already out there, learn from what has been done previously, and develop a model which is suitable to the 21st century and to our current thinking, and also future-proof. We provided some feedback from our existing stakeholder engagement efforts, and we have done an overview of existing rules and procedures of other science policy bodies, again, to look to see where we can learn from. And we are about to post online the procedures for the election to fill the vacancies in the Bureau, including the chair. And we are planning a briefing to member states and major groups on the Sunday at 5 o'clock in the main meeting room at SCAP to iron out any questions which may arise and which may be concerning member states and other stakeholders in the lead up to that first day on Monday. Next slide, please. So the main expectations of this meeting, obviously we need to finalize our Bureau membership, including the election of the chair. This is very, very important for us moving forward. And as I say, on the 29th, we will have a briefing after the regional meetings on the process to be followed to achieve this. Next slide, please. We want to also look have discussions on issues outlined in paragraph 5 of the resolution, primarily focusing on the options for scope and the options for principal functions. My personal view is that the principal functions are very, very well defined within the resolution. And so we are hoping that we will get to a position where the member states are able to give us clear guidance on what to do next and hopefully start developing the text for this, the operations of the panel in this area. The issue of scope is far more diverse, and our paper aims to show how broad or narrow we could possibly be in our expectations here. And so we are anticipating very diverse views in this area. And it will be very interesting to see where we land on this and what guidance we're provided with in the lead up to the second meeting. Next slide, please. So this is one of two schematics which are part of the scope document, and it lays out the principles of adopting a chemicals out approach or a observed impacts in approach. And this is based around the value chains for key sectors, and then looks at the chemicals used in each of those stages of the life cycle or the value chain, the wastes that are produced as a result of each of those steps in the value chain, and also the possible pollution and impacts which could be derived from that. And we need to look and have clear guidance on which approach we adopt, or whether we adopt a flexible approach which looks at both options on a case-by-case basis. Next slide. And moving on. And we've also looked at the interaction of the three elements of the resolution: chemicals, waste, and pollution, are all very, very broad topics. And the Venn diagram aims to sort of show that if we focus on the intersection of the three elements, we could have a very narrow scope. But if we want to include other elements of more general chemicals management or more general waste management or general issues related to pollution, the scope will creep and grow. and that also has an impact on the cost of the operation of the new panel, and also the modality by which it would function and the expert panels which would need to be established under the new panel. So some interesting discussions to be had here, and it was a very interesting process developing these documents. Next slide, please. In terms of scope, we are looking at we pose a number of questions. We look at the need or the idea of an integrative approach, the possibility of developing a conceptual framework to guide the work of the new panel, whether we should explicitly include or exclude specific elements of chemicals, waste, or pollution, or all three. And we need to identify the entities that the panel would support most directly in the light of its scope. Again, what is the interrelationship, looking in the membership in the room, between this new panel and existing bodies which are in this space, which are very busy and very operational, and have a lot to offer. So how do we manage that exchange of information and the interrelationships between BRS, SciChem, Minamata, WHO, IRP, Montreal Protocol, and so forth with this new body? Where do we fit so that we don't duplicate, but we complement? The open-ended working group may wish to then give us direction on where we need to focus on what we need to do next. And that's what we're hoping to get, is clarity from member states based on active dialogue and discussion on where we go to. Next slide, please. In terms of the principal functions, these are fairly well defined within the resolution. Horizon scanning is in there. That's new, that's different to the existing panels on climate change and biodiversity ecosystem services. So we need to give some thought to what horizon scanning entails. Obviously assessments, but the nature of those assessments, the scale and scope of those assessments need to be looked at. We're looking at knowledge management, communications, information sharing, stakeholder engagement, all of which are explicitly mentioned within the resolution itself. And also the issue of capacity building, which, although not mentioned in the actual resolution, has been a common feature of many of the stakeholder engagement dialogues that we've had. And many member states are asking about what are the options that we could consider for capacity building within this new platform or this new panel. So we provide some common definitions for each of these, an overview of relevant mandates, and the activities that are included in existing bodies. We also look to identify a range of approaches by which each of these functions could be implemented. And so we are hoping that there will be, again, an active, very lively debate on where you as member states want us to go with the functions definitions and how the panel will address the functions as defined in the resolution. Next slide, please. We then provide a series of considerations which the open-ended working group may wish us to focus on. And we provide the linkages to the relevant INF documents to help inform that conversation and that discussion, so that we as a secretariat get clear guidance on where you want us to go next. Next slide, please. So in terms of the timetable, budget and sequencing of work, again, this slide is blank on purpose. We basically need to be informed by member states. This is a member state driven process. And so we look forward to getting clarity on where you want us to go in terms of our intersessional work, our timings of various meetings, the timetable of events and regional consultations, for example. We do have a little bit of more positive news in terms of budget compared to when the budget document was written, with a number of significant contributions in the pipeline. So we are hopeful that we will have liquidity and financial security at least until the second meeting towards the end of this year, which at the time the documents were written for the OEWG 1.2 was not the case. So that is a very big positive to see that certain partners have stepped up and provided the necessary resources for us to continue this very important work. Next slide, please. So to date, we have active contributions in alphabetical order from France, Germany, Norway, Switzerland, the UK. We've come up with a budget estimate which includes the not just the meeting and the activities costs, but also the secretariat costs. This is an extra budgetary process. We are working currently on the basis of UNEP providing the vast majority of staff support to this process. We are now in a position also where we, thanks to the contribution from Switzerland, being able to hire some long-term consultants who are incredibly valuable to this process. And I am pleased to announce that we do now also have 2 JPO positions confirmed, one from China and one from France, who will be joining us during this year. So, you know, again, this is an evolving process, but at the moment, the costs for this process and the secretariat is being covered by UNEP's own budget, which is not sustainable moving forward. We are in the process of developing new proposals, and I'm hoping that at that meeting we will be able to confirm contributions from a number of significant contributions from a number of donors. And once again, it would be wrong of me not to reiterate the wording of the resolution. Member states are in a position to do so, are invited to provide financial contributions to support the delivery of the process, including the cost of the secretariat. Next slide, please. So we would like clear guidance again on how you want us to focus our efforts in the lead up to OEWG 2. It will depend on how much clarity we get at the meeting, obviously, in terms of the functions and the scope discussion. But we are hoping that we can start in the intersessional process, also looking at the governance, operating procedures, and basic modus operandi of the new panel, because we only have 3 meetings and we can't leave all of this very important nitty-gritty detail until the last meeting, because we do risk not having time to actually achieve our results. Next slide, please. We've done a lot of work on stakeholder engagement, which I've mentioned to you in previous GEM briefings, and we intend to continue with that. We've had a lot of outreach to key organizations, key partners, and we are ever open to increasing our interactions with new stakeholders, with new people who have value added to this entire process. The door remains open for people to join. Next slide, please. We've completed this survey, as I mentioned. We had a lot of respondents, and the INF6 document does provide an overview of this. It is a very diverse cross-section of views, and I would encourage you to have a look at that and to get a flavour for the flavour of the discussions that we are likely to have in Bangkok. Next slide. We will continue to have webinars, and so after this meeting, we hope to continue this process. So there is one scheduled now for the 24th of January, and we're in the process of finalizing the panel composition for that. Next slide, please. National focal points. Despite our best efforts and the best efforts of the Bureau, we currently still only have 109 member states who have nominated national focal points. Please, if you are a national representative here and you have not nominated your national focal point, please do so. We will be sending out more messages to our contact list to encourage this ahead of the meeting. The 109 member states, however, is a quorum body in terms of the number of people who are registered or will be nominated and present. We have, I think, over 500 people registered for this meeting in Bangkok, and so we are confident that we will have the required numbers of member states present to have the vote and conclude the nomination of the chair and hopefully the election of the officers from the Eastern European Group. Next slide, please. We're also proposing to enhance or supplement the work that we've done on scope and functions by a number of expert deep dive dialogues, we're terming them, during the OEWG 1.2 at the Monday and Tuesday lunchtime. We're currently finalizing invitations of key speakers. I can say that we have got agreement from a senior vice president of the World Bank to be one of these speakers. And that's the person who's responsible for their pollution work. So that's and circular economy. So that's a really sort of strong lead. And so we are reaching out to a number of other speakers who can stimulate the discussion ahead of the hopefully the contact groups working on Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday and Thursday on the scope and functions work.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So that's it. Thank you very much. I've been a little bit long there, but there's been a lot to cover. And I look forward to any questions and look forward to listening to the remainder of the speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sorry for the... Thank you very much, Kevin. Indeed, that was a long and complete presentation. To continue updating us on the preparations for the Bangkok meeting, we have also here a representative from the host country, Terraporn Wiriwitikorn. You are online with us. We muted you once while you were listening because your mic was open and we were hearing some noise. So don't forget to unmute yourself when you are now taking the floor. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that I forget to unmute my microphone. All right. Excellency and distinguished participants, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. Thank you for inviting us as the host country to join this important event to prepare in advance before the resume first session of the ad hoc open-ended working group that gonna be held in Bangkok in the end of this January from 30 January to the 3rd of February this year. And the Royal Government of Thailand has a great honor and pleasure to welcome all of you in Bangkok, Thailand after our past difficult 3 years fighting and living with COVID-19. We hope you are enjoy staying in Bangkok and enjoy our Thai manner, culture, and lifestyle here. Next slide, please. I gonna cover a bit that already in the logistic note of participants provided by the Secretariat and are already available on the website of the OEWG 1.2. The information of participant, venue, visa application, health measure, and also the reception dinner. And the last slide, I gonna share my the Thailand perspective on the meeting, on the establishment of the SPP on the panel. Next, please. This is just to highlight the information for participants that gonna participate the meeting. The logistic note are already available and they contain a lot of important information, and also they also have the website of the venue that you can explore and access in case that you didn't be here before. And the health measure cover all the COVID-19 recommendation and yellow fever and Zika that we concern. And also the last one is tourist information that you can find it in the logistic note. Next, please. This is the venue, the picture of the venue, the United Conference Center, UNCC, located at La Dam Nern Nok Avenue in Bangkok, in the inner center of Bangkok, Thailand. Next, please. Due to I'm sorry because I update some information about the visa. Even in the logistic note for the participant, say that the visa application will be borne by your own participant. However, we try to facilitate for the for participants that who encounter the difficulty in applying a visa at the Thai embassy that may not located in the countries, and they may have to apply at the embassy outside their country. So the Thai government have been working with the Secretariat to ease this implication since the mid of December last year, and we received all necessary documents of such participants last week, and then some participants have been contact to request to confirm some information or submit some more missing information, because all information that we have, all necessary document that we have for the participant that who don't have the Thai embassy in their country. So we gonna gather all documents, and then we gonna transmit all documents to our local immigration office to request them to allow those participants to apply the visa on arrival at the arrival airport. And we also transmit the information to the Airlines Operation Committee, or so-called AOC, to contact all airlines to allow you, the participant who are apply the visa on arrival as our assistant, to all flight check-in at the departure and connecting airports. So it means you're gonna have the facilitation till you arrive at Thai airports. After that, you can proceed with the visa on arrival, because the immigration counter gonna have your information and document ready, and the list of the participant that request for the visa on arrival, extra from the participant that already apply or have agreement with the Thai government already. And in case that you are not sure, or you need the confirmation that you are on our list or not, or because you don't have the Thai embassy in your place, so please contact me via my email that already in this on this slide, and as soon as possible, and no later than tomorrow at 4 p.m. local time in Bangkok, Thailand, and including provide your copies of passport, your personal invitation letter issued by UNEP, and e-ticket or itinerary of your travel to us, so we can take further work on that. And when you arrive at the airport to apply the a visa on arrival, the applicant must fill the form at the counter of the visa on arrival, and you need to prepare one recent photo size passport size photograph of your own, and a fee a visa fee of about 2,000 baht, or around $60. This is because we cannot provide the free of charge of this. So we try to work with the immigration office, but they cannot allow us to give the free of charge. So but however we sorry, apologize for this implication. And next, please. This is the health measure, but right now it's not mandatory anymore. But however, we recommend all participants to have available with you your travel insurance to cover the COVID-19 medical care service cost during your stay in Thailand. You may get the random check for this, but however, it's not mandatory at all. And you recommend also to wear a well-fitting face mask that fully cover your mouth and nose in crowded or public areas, and even in the sky or underground train, or in the malls, in the supermarket, fresh markets, or convenience stores. And I think in the meeting room, in the venue as well. But in the venue, you can find the recommendation, the guidance during you spend time in the UNCC is already contained in the logistic note for the participant. And we also recommend you always practice of distancing, mask wearing, and often hand washing. And we also would like to highlight that you please stay at your accommodation if you feeling unwell. If you feel unwell during the meeting, please contact the number that provide for the necessary for the further guidance to deal with your symptom or deal with your medical care. And we also I think the UNEP also prepare for the first aid ambulance in the venue as well, for in case, just for the medical emergency case. And self-isolation in case that you test positive, if you regularly test yourself, and inform the secretariat via the email that provided. This is just highlight because this is the recommendation and guidance in the logistic notes as well. Next, please.
Thank you.
And for the yellow fever, I think participants who are travel from or travel via or through country that have been declared the yellow fever affected area by the Thai Ministry Public Health announcement. So right now we have 45 countries, and you can find the list of the country in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, and who from those areas are required to provide a valid international health.
I think this is clear. Maybe we can move a little bit further.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So
the slides will be shared anyway.
Okay, next, please. This the next, please. Okay, this one. I'm gonna share that we're gonna organize the welcome reception in the venue on the first day of the meeting at the first floor of the UNCC, or United Nations Conference Center. And the code, you can wear a smart casual, and please wear your badge when you were there. Okay, this is welcome from the Thai government. Next, please. This is the last one that we would like to share. So for the tone that you the Kevin already explained, or what they expect or what they foreseen to discuss during the meeting. So the first one, for the scope of the panel, in terms of objective, we supporting Thai government supporting the proposed draft overall objective in principle with minor amendments that we gonna share during the meeting. And definitely we also supporting the concept idea of balancing between specificity and flexibility when developing the specific objective, and which should reflect the desirable and ultimate expectation of the panel as well. And definitely we're gonna discuss the concept framework as guided by the Secretariat, by the Kelvin, and the identify MEAs or relevant entity. In Thailand, we would like to highlight the Beyond 2020 instrument, and also the definitely chemical and waste conventions that we already have. And we have to foresee the new international legally binding on the plastic pollution that we now working on. We just have the first INC in Uruguay, and I think the other organization or other relevant intergovernmental organization related to the chemical waste and pollution support to identify and cover under the scope of the panel as well. And for the principal function, as Kevin just present, that we agree that the draft the key function that identified in the resolution of UNEA 5.2 are already concrete and solid. However, we propose the thing that we think is supposed to include in the panel function as well. It is the overlook through the overlapping or linking or cost-cutting issue among the conventions on chemical waste or under the Beyond 2020 instrument or the new legally binding that we're working on the plastic pollution, and between the convention and other MEAs, such as for the climate change, for the biodiversity, for the others as well. And we also would like to propose to start initial discussing or identification of key elements for governing structure of the panel, or even we don't have more time, or because we have to focus the key option on the scope and the function, but or we support to identify or the suggestion or the way forward for further work on this issue during the intersessional period. I think that all from Thailand, and I think we thank you very much for inviting us to share our concern, and we look forward to seeing you in Bangkok. Hope you have pleasant flight arriving Bangkok and safely and smoothly, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Teraporn, for the useful information concerning visa and other logistics. We had a few questions before we start this event on this specific topic, and also on providing Thailand's views on the establishment of this new science and policy panel. As mentioned earlier, the resolution adopted at the UN Environmental Assembly last March that started this process requested the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme to invite the World Health Organization to play a role as appropriate in this process. It's a pleasure now to turn to Leslie Onion, who is the head of the Chemical Safety and Health Unit at the World Health Organization, and who is here in Geneva with us. Leslie, over to you.
Thanks very much, Diana. It's a great pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everybody. And it's even a great pleasure to be here in Environmental House and to have direct interactions with those that are present in the room. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, and that was a deliberate choice because I didn't want it to appear that WHO had the answers to the many questions that are on the table. I think we at WHO are in a similar position to other stakeholders and participants. There's a lot of detailed information to reflect on that's in the agenda papers for the meeting, and many of us are just getting across that information now. So it's a very good opportunity this afternoon to perhaps have a very free-ranging and interactive discussion. So I thought perhaps if I had a PowerPoint, it might limit us to that discussion. But I want to start off by saying that WHO is very committed to this process. And the reasons for that are obvious, that the burden of disease shows no signs of decreasing despite many successes in our efforts. We still see 1/4 of all global deaths can be attributed to the environment. So the scope for avoiding deaths and injuries is huge. We know that half of the burden of disease can be attributed to air pollution, so 7 million of 14 million that can be attributed to the environment can be attributed to air pollution. We know that chemicals comes in at quite a relatively small amount, 1.6 or 1.8 million. However, the methodologies and the data that we have on the impacts of chemicals leaves a lot of unanswered questions. So we still think that is a tip of the iceberg. So health is a very important reason why we need to manage chemicals and deal with waste, but of course, importantly, prevent pollution. So these deaths are all avoidable. And the reason why, and whilst they can obviously have a dramatic impact at the individual and family level, at societal level, the impact on the health system is enormous. While these deaths and illnesses can be preventable, we free up the health system for other more life-affirming measures, and to everyone's benefit. So we've been involved in many of the processes, and we've continued to be involved in many processes of the multilateral environment agenda. We see that health is not yet integrated into the processes at an optimal level, and we're still discussing ways of strengthening the involvement in many of the different forums, notably the strategic approach to international chemicals management. And how best that health can be integrated in the science policy panel is one issue that's obviously now we're hoping to come up with some creative solutions collectively over this open-ended working group process. WHO, being a specialized UN agency, has a great many processes, scientific processes, which are our bread and butter of work, whether it be developing risk assessment methodologies for chemical assessments, for undertaking risk assessments of chemicals of concern, for identifying health protective interventions, and so on. So we have a lot of experience in that area, and we're happy to share that, and also create a better awareness, I guess, of the range of work that WHO is doing that could be relevant to this science policy process. We also have other examples of work, rigorous procedures for protecting against conflict of interest, for example, which I think will be very important in the work of the science policy panel. And there our experiences largely based on the Framework Convention for Tobacco Control, where we have many years of experience. So we are very interested to share this with the process, the OEWG process. When we're thinking about the functions and scope of the new panel, as Kevin has outlined and is set out in the agenda papers, there's a lot, great many, perhaps more than we imagined, existing processes to navigate around. And I think it's important to think about what could be missing in the existing processes so the panel can make a big contribution. what we're seeing is that there are many proven interventions, many proven guidance which has been developed under these different intergovernmental processes, but yet implementation on the ground is far from ideal. And so we hope that that could be something that perhaps could be addressed in the science policy context. Horizon scanning obviously is very important for us all, and so this is something that's probably best done once rather than many, many times by different organizations. And importantly, we think that in order to move implementation on the ground, we need to do much more work on identifying sort of win-win interventions so that these interventions can then be sort of demonstrated how beneficial they are, not only in saving lives and disease, but also oftentimes the most economically sort of beneficial as well. Obviously, when we look at the IPBES and the IPCC processes, we see that the processes there take many years, and that's another reason why I think that we're needing to look at these high levels, more strategic functions, rather than carrying out more operational or programmatic work, which is already done by the existing systems. The fact that the science policy panel is modelled on this sort of triple pillar approach, obviously being the third pillar, we need to look at how that third pillar will interact with the earlier two to make it a stable house, not having two legs stronger than one. And so I think that was to invite WHO to play a role as appropriate. Clearly, we are committed, we are involved. However, I think that all the stakeholders need to understand that the UNEA rules of procedure have been adopted for the work of the OEWG, and my understanding, therefore, of that is that in this process, WHO would be an observer. We hope that the stakeholders at the OEWG call on us to provide insights, information that we may have, and even our views, and so that we're not just going to be observing, but strictly speaking, my understanding is that the adopted rules of procedure, that is the role that's been assigned to us. I know that in discussing with the Secretariat, that there are other measures that are being considered, and we have received an invitation to be part of a technical advisory group as well, which we're looking very positively at. So we're certainly interested to explore with the Secretariat and in discussion with stakeholders how we can best contribute to the process, but bearing in mind it does have some formal restrictions placed upon us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie. In interest of time, we will quickly move to, we have invited the various stakeholders and we will hear from them how they are getting mobilized in this process. And we will start by Giulia Carlini, who is a senior attorney in the Environmental Health Program of the Center for International Environmental Law, known also as CIEL, who is joining us online. And so Giulia will speak about the civil society mobilization in this process. Giulia, over to you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And talking about civil society mobilization makes me think that we need to start from the resolution. And in the resolution, Article 5 explicitations that the open-ended working group will need to prepare proposals for the science policy panel to consider the relationship with stakeholders, including NGOs and civil society. So quickly in my intervention, I would like to elaborate on 3 main points. The first is, what do we mean with civil society? Then what could be concretely the role of civil society in the panel? And lastly, some of the key challenges, I think especially for negotiators, related to stakeholders in the science policy panel. So first of all, when I'm referring to civil society, I'm thinking of those public interest organizations, those actors that are not dependent on profit and who have the public's well-being as a priority. Public interest organizations have been proven useful and important to engage with, both because they've been representing affected populations and communities, but also because they've been a resource providing data from the ground on chemicals and waste and pollution across the past years and decades. As a quick example, let's think of lead paint. Lead paint was believed to be eliminated until civil society brought scientific evidence of lead paint being available for use in homes and schools in low and middle income countries. Now, what can be the role of civil society in the panel? We think that the role that would be most beneficial for civil society in the panel, for the panel itself, would be having civil society as active players in the governance of the work of the future panel. That means having civil society participating in all aspects of the deliberative work, and also be directly involved in the governing bodies of the panel as a non-voting member. For instance, that would include activities from the submission of inputs to the agenda setting, contribution for the panel, and so on. This would increase transparency and also facilitate ownership of the activities of the panel. Now, one challenge we're seeing with civil society mobilization in the open-ended working group is the gap between the appetite to engage and the limited resources and funding. So we think that compared to other processes, there will be relatively less members of civil society that will be able to be present in person in Bangkok at the OEWG. And of course, we've seen how the meetings agenda is very crowded between chemicals and waste and plastic negotiations, but that's a challenge in common also with small delegations. So to make the best use of civil society presence in Bangkok, we think it would be good to build on the engagement and participation of civil society that we've seen at the first session in Nairobi, where we heard from major groups. We've heard from the women's major group, from children and youth major group, and of course the rules of procedure of UNEA are adopted mutatis mutandis to the OEWG. But we've also seen how it was possible for also single members, single organizations to also express their views. So we've heard various environmental NGOs and various members of the technical and scientific community. And so we think this approach that is really taking also the best lessons learned on participation that we've seen at BRS and SciCam to have single organizations intervene as well, included in the contact group, is really allowing to broadening the perspective, and it will continue to involve the highest possible level of expertise and knowledge that will benefit this negotiation. As a last reflection and challenge for the negotiators, who I think would really need to set this right from the beginning, I would like to ask to reflect on how will observers be defined? Who would be invited to sit at the science policy panel and who is not welcome? Because there is a big, big difference between the public interest organizations and those entities or individuals who have a vested financial interest in, for instance, the marketing of hazardous substances. In 2021, the UN Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights published a report, The Right to Science, where he identified threats and science and scientists. And these include the industry's tactics to divert and delay, arising from the tobacco industry playbook from the 1950s, that certain chemical industries still use to delay regulation on toxics. And of course, there's the threat of the conflict of interest. Right now, in the rules of procedure for the OEWG, to participate as an observer, we don't have ways of including declaration of conflict of interest. There are no rules to avoid the conflict of interest. But looking at the panel, who will have its own rules, it will be crucial to draft rules that protect the panel from vested interest for the own credibility of the panel, and to make sure we don't undermine its own effort. And I'd like to also echo what my predecessor from WHO mentioned. The WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control in regard to the tobacco industry can really be an example to follow and to learn from. Where early in that process, the perpetrator of the tobacco epidemic, the tobacco industry, was formally excluded from participation. And of course, there are lessons learned from the existing panels, IPCC, IPBES, that have been mentioned. So to conclude, in practice, public interest organizations in the panel would contribute to transparency and credibility, the likelihood of the acceptance of the finding of the panel, and also facilitate then the implementation phase and increase political impact. Because science does not benefit society unless it's translated into real measures that provide protection to the population and turn into action without delay. And with that, we're ready to continue engaging and supporting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia, for sharing with us the challenges, the views, the questions from a civil society perspective. We are now turning to Martin Kaiser, who is the Senior Vice President for Corporate Projects of the BASF, who is with us here in Geneva in the room. And Martin, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Diana. And let me first thank UNEP for inviting me to this briefing session to provide the private sector perspective. So, you know, we are in times of change. The private sector, industries and companies are facing multiple transitions. And let me just name a few of these transitions. The transition to carbon neutrality, digitalization, the transition to a circular economy, and the transition to safe and sustainable by design products. And at the same time, regulations are changing and new regulations are proposed and implemented. So for these transitions, companies have to change and massively invest in several areas, including research and innovation, development of new products, production processes, distribution, and disposal. And what is not clear, I think, to all actors in the private sector and the value chains is that improved chemical and waste management governed by SAICM is a core element of these transition pathways. SciChem as a multi-stakeholder process offers the opportunity for the private sector to fully engage and help creating and designing solutions for the challenges we are facing. And I'm personally convinced that if we want to be successful, we should not only work together, but do this in an open-minded way, respecting and trusting each other. And the issue of conflict of interest was addressed already. So we need clear rules and procedures. For me, successful outcome could result in the development of implementation of a balanced mix of regulatory measures and voluntary initiatives. And I just want to point to one voluntary initiative, which includes, and it's one of the few initiatives by the private sector, which includes a value chain approach, which is the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, where you see all actors in the value chain working together to implement solutions on the ground. So to achieve this, we need all actors in the value chains being engaged. And of course, the chemical industry is especially affected. So ICCA, the global voice of the chemical industry, supports the concept of the Science Policy Panel for Chemicals, Waste and Pollution Prevention. And we really appreciate the opportunity to participate in these discussions. We think the SPP should have a clear and distinct mandate, operate in an advisory capacity, and have a multi-stakeholder and geographically balanced representation. We will also help motivating other industry sectors to engage. That include converters, downstream industries like brand owners, retail sector, waste and recycling sector. And we know in the SciChem process that they weren't really very active. So I think we need to change this, because at the end, products are brought to the market and we need them to be involved in looking for new solutions. So I believe that the private sector has an important role to play in the SPP process. We can provide key scientific data, manufacturing use information on substances, and as you all know, industry scientists have long experience in evaluating the risk of chemicals and products. Today, we are not there. We do not have all solutions available to build a circular economy or a more circular economy. We need the innovation power of the private sector to find and develop new business processes and solutions. And that is the reason, and now, we're talking about motivating other sectors to come to the table, why I believe it is so important to have the industry fully engaged in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for providing us a perspective from the private sector and also how you are mobilizing within your sector in the run-up to this process. We have another Martin with us, Martin Scheringer, who is the chair of the board of the International Panel on Chemical Pollution, who is joining us from Zurich and who is here to provide the scientific community mobilization, perspective on mobilization and mobilization in this process. Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Diana, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning and good evening. My name is Martin Scheringer, and I will speak here on behalf of the International Panel on Chemical Pollution, which is a group of academic scientists. I also prepared some slides. I'm just waiting. Diana, do you have them? Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm speaking on behalf of the International Panel on Chemical Pollution, IPCP, which is a network of academic scientists. Next slide, please. Just a few words about myself. I'm a chemist by training. I've worked in the area of environmental chemistry for 25 years. I work as a professor of environmental chemistry at the Masaryk University in Brno in the Czech Republic, and also as a senior scientist and group leader at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, or ETH, in Zurich in Switzerland. And I'm the chair of the International Panel on Chemical Pollution. Next, please. The IPCP is a global network of academic scientists working on chemical pollution issues. This is not limited to just natural sciences, chemistry or toxicology, but really includes scientists from any discipline where scientists are working on problems and questions related to chemical pollution. The IPCP is an association according to Swiss law. It was established in 2008, and you can find the bylaws and goals of our organization and the way we work from our website at ipcp.ch. Important here is now that we are also accredited as an observer for the open-ended working group process, and of course then also for the meeting in Bangkok. Next slide, please. The IPCP has thought and discussed and talked about a global science policy panel for many years. This is an editorial that we published 15 years ago. You see the title, Towards an Intergovernmental Panel on Chemical Pollution. At the time, that was, of course, directly based on the model of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. But then at the time, we had to realize that it was not yet the time for something intergovernmental on chemicals. So we as a group of scientists, had to find out what we could do ourselves. And we then just formed the IPCP as a group of scientists. We changed the meaning of the I from intergovernmental to international. So we still have the same acronym, IPCP. We have also realized that that has caused a bit of confusion in the last month or so. But we have had the name for so long, so we have kept it. But I want to say clearly, of course, the IPCP, as on the behalf of which I'm speaking here today, is a normal non-governmental organization. Its members are individual scientists, and it has nothing to do with any intergovernmental entity. Next slide, please. So 2 years ago, we published this article in the journal Science, where we more specifically outlined why a global science policy panel on chemicals and waste is needed or will be useful, and also how it could work, what the scope could be, and also how it could be set up in a way that it complements the many existing science policy interface bodies in the area of chemicals and waste. As Kevin Helps already mentioned, the landscape is very complicated. Many bodies already exist and do a lot of important work, and it will be key that a new panel does not duplicate the work that's already being done. Next slide, please. Then, when the paper in Science was published, we initiated a sign-on campaign in support of the proposal for an SPP. So that should not be SSP here, but that should be SPP, the Science Policy Panel. That was before the UNIA meeting in February 2022. So we wanted to support the idea, the proposal for such a panel. We received a lot of support and interest. You see almost 2,100 scientists and practitioners from all over the world, more than 90 countries, signed this declaration and expressed their support and interest. Next, please. Yeah, thank you. So what are we doing now specifically for the Bangkok meeting? Of course, something kind of obvious is that scientific input to a science policy panel is key. And it is obvious, but it is not totally straightforward how this will work. We would anticipate that once the panel is established, the role of scientists would be similar to, or the same almost to, what it is in the IPCC or IPES. So then scientists would be nominated as experts who do the actual scientific work. But right now we are in the process leading to the new panel, and we think that also in that process, in the negotiations and discussions on the way to the panel, scientific input will be important. And that is a more open question. So a key question for us within the IPCP right now is, how can academic scientists contribute to the work of the open-ended working group on the way to the panel? Next, please. Oops, the formatting is not exactly right, but that's okay. You can still read it. So what we're doing right now is we are talking or discussing with UNEP if, and if yes, how universities can be accredited to the UNEP process, to UNIA and UNEP. This is not obvious. UNEP, they said they are interested themselves to find out how this may work. They welcome applications from universities from all over the world for accreditation. There are no clear rules for this yet, at least, because universities are somewhat a different body compared to other organizations, in a way that also scientists are not a stakeholder group. Scientists are different from, let's say, non-governmental organizations in the field of environment or civil society groups. They are also different from corporate world groups and business groups. And therefore, also universities are different, and it is not clear how they may join the process. In addition, we will also attend the meeting in Bangkok in person, and we will report to our network, to the group of interested academic scientists from the meeting directly. We will also receive questions and inputs during the meeting and try to make them visible and heard at the meeting. Next, please. We will also solicit input from the many scientists around the world for position papers and statements on the scope and function of the panel, which are the key questions for now and for this year. And we are actually preparing a first position paper right now, and we hope we will have it ready at the meeting in Bangkok. Next, please. Of course, we will also coordinate our contributions and our work with other scientific societies, scientific groups, for example, the Endocrine Society or the Royal Society of Chemistry or CTAC, so that the different scientific groups can also work together. And then next, please. And specifically, just before the meeting in Bangkok, we will run a webinar on conflict of interest in the context of chemicals and waste governance on January 26. This is advertised on our website. You can still register for this webinar if you are interested, because we think it will be important to highlight the questions and challenges that are connected with the problem of conflict of interest and vested interests in the work of the panel. And then that's my last slide now, please. Well, I would like to thank you for your attention, and please feel free to contact us for questions and contributions at spp@ipcp.ch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for reminding us how you were mobilized in the run-up to the last session of the UN Environmental Assembly on this topic, how you are making synergies with other scientific communities, and some of the elements you are putting in place in the run-up of the meeting in Bangkok and what we will be doing after. That is very useful. And I think with those presentations from stakeholders, the questions that were answered online got answered. At least that's what I understand. I'm looking at the room, but because it's already 3 p.m., we also have a member state online who will, I'm sure, provide his perspective on this meeting and help us closing this event with his remarks. So if the panel here and the attendees in the room agree, we will directly go to Michel. In the room, of course, we can continue the discussions bilaterally. And I will, Michel, directly turn to you. Michel Chiron is the chemicals and waste focal point for the Swiss government, and he's joining us online to close this event. Michel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Diana, for giving me the floor. I hope I am audible, and I would like to start by thanking the Gen and you, Diana, with your team for organizing this event. Many thanks on behalf of the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment. My name is Michel Chiron, and I am a Senior Policy Advisor at the Federal Office for the Environment, and I'm have the privilege to be involved in the process that we are discussing today, the Science Policy Panel. A special thanks to the government of Thailand for hosting the upcoming OEWG meeting later this month and for providing information and perspectives here today. And also many thanks to all the other speakers for sharing their views and information here today. This was a very rich Gen session with logistical and substantial information on the science policy panel, and I attempt to link some of the points made in the session today. So from my listening to the discussion of the panel, this session made it clear that the panel should and will be relevant for a range of stakeholders from around the world, and that many stakeholders are already much engaged. And those stakeholders have also participated in the survey, and that you have mentioned, Kevin. The results of the survey showed that regarding the scope of the panel, the majority favor a broad scope. So the future panel should be able to work on a broad range of issues. Indeed, it is wise to have a broad scope and at the same time install good procedures for priority setting and agreeing the work program of the panel and agreeing a budget. This way, the plenary of the panel will decide on the assessments to be carried out and will not be restricted over time when new issues might arise and might be identified through the horizon scanning of the panel across the different fields that were also mentioned today. In order to ensure a good link from the latest scientific knowledge to the policy makers, so academia does have a crucial role, and Martin Scheringer, that came out clearly from your interventions. Academia must therefore be very present and involved from the start. And at the same time, Julia, you mentioned the importance of transparency and ownership, and that is very important in this process. And civil society has a very important, is very pertinent in this regard, and this also holds true for academia. Then the process was established. The OEWG process was established through the UNEA 5.8 resolution. And several speakers today have mentioned that the UNEA resolution is already very complete and precise with regard to many aspects of the new SPP. It is already clear, for example, that the panel will be interdisciplinary, independent, and intergovernmental. And also, the functions are actually already spelled out, and not much discussion has to take place on the functions at the Bangkok meeting. We have heard this several times during this Gen meeting. According to the agreed UNEA resolution, the functions will be undertaking horizon scanning, conducting assessments, identifying gaps, and Terraporn, I would like to link to your intervention. I would argue that identifying gaps also implies demonstrating all existing links and avoiding overlap. So in that sense, your point very much strongly links to this existing function. And there's also the last function is information sharing with countries, and in particular developing countries. Then Leslie, you made it very clear that the nexus of health and environment is a priority of the panel, and of course, therefore, the engagement of the WHO is very welcome and crucial. Martin Keijer, you made it very clear also that the private sector engages and that there is data and information that is available and necessary to be considered. And so this should be taken into account. Also IPCC and IPBES were mentioned today. Yes, they provide the global scientific consensus on different fields, and they therefore are models for our new panel and definitely we should not reinvent the wheel and take them as the starting point. Considering all of this, we shall not reopen the elements already agreed multilaterally at UNEA, and we are therefore actually very advanced for the new panel. That also means we should think ahead and not stop at the Bangkok meeting. And you, Kevin, spoke about the future OEWG meetings as well. And yes, those meetings, they can best be prepared with the guidance of the OEWG to the Secretariat in terms of the preparation for the meetings, also when it comes to draft papers that need to be prepared so that the relevant information is there for the stakeholders engaging in the process. So these are some of the common points that came out today from my point of view, and also again showing how many actors are joining forces in this process to make this a success, and which also means that a broad scope can be covered because there is a broad range of actors that have different interests, but also that have different expertise to bring to the table. And in that sense, I very much look forward to the meeting in Bangkok and the continued process of this open-ended working group. And I want simply to thank again all the panelists for taking the time and sharing their views. And of course, also again, thanking the Jen, Diana, and your team for this very useful briefing. Thanks again very much.
Thank you very much, Michel, for closing this event. Kevin, we wish you and your team a successful meeting in Bangkok. We also wish all the stakeholders who have been with us today a safe trip to Thailand and a good meeting, a successful meeting from your perspective. So thank you all. Thank you, the panelists, for joining us today. Thank you for the attendees. You were over 150 online with us on various platforms. And thank you for who is later watching the video of this event. Just wanted to raise with you, share with you, some of you mentioned a heavy year with a lot of meetings, which also provides some challenges for some stakeholders. So this is an agenda only for Geneva with some important meetings where environment will be present. And we have also listed the World Health Assembly, but many others. And on the bottom right, you see a lot of other meetings, including the Bangkok meeting that are not taking place in Geneva, but for which a lot of stakeholders in Geneva are mobilized. And we at the Geneva Environment Network will be organizing many events in preparation, not only of what's happening in Geneva, but also on what's happening abroad. And we wanted to conclude with that slide. And once more, wishing you all a lot of success in the coming meeting in Bangkok. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for sparing the time to join. And I look forward to seeing some of you in person very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, colleagues.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.
All the best.
Bangkok.